Hello, friends. Welcome back to the School of Self-Worth. I'm your host, Nicole Song. Today, I am so excited to welcome to the podcast one of my clients, Kim Moy. When I first met Kim, she was struggling in a corporate job with hearing a call for what was next for her and not knowing what it was time for her to do. And really, the work that she did in her 6 months with me in Your Clear Calling helped her see that pathway forward. And now Kim is full-time supporting other caregivers like herself with her dream business. I cannot wait for you to hear the details of this journey. It truly is inspiring to see the way she made this pivot and was able to step into her own business. So stay tuned for that. And if you are a high achieving, mission driven Asian American woman who wants to pivot your career in 60 days so you can step into your aligned purpose, DM me pivot at Nicole Song on Instagram. I've got something there for you. Okay, friends, let's dive into this remarkable conversation. Kim, welcome to the School of Self-Worth. What a joy to have you on the podcast with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Nicole.
So I'm so excited to have you all meet Kim. Kim is a longtime client, and I invited her on to share about her experiences, to talk about everything she's doing because she's made so many strides and so many major shifts in her life since she joined. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on Kim because Kim is not only she's an entrepreneur, she's a mother, she's a caregiver, she's a wife, and she actually lives not that far from me in Seattle. So I love that she's close by here as well. So Kim, can you take us back? Like we were just talking about how long ago it was that you met me and found me. Could you bring us back in time to that place of where you were in your life before you started going into coaching and getting support?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Boy, 3 years ago, I feel like I was in a completely different space, just mentally and emotionally. I was still working in my corporate job, and I enjoyed the intellectual challenges of the job, and I enjoyed my team, and we had definitely a lot of interesting work ahead of us. I started feeling this calling to pursue my passion to support fellow caregivers. Prior to that, I had been leading a monthly support group for caregivers of my husband's illness, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. It affects millions of people in the US and worldwide. Now, a lot of people with long COVID are now also experiencing these same debilitating symptoms. Um, and so while I was doing this monthly support group, I knew that I could do more. I wanted to do more to support fellow caregivers, yet I was too scared. I was too scared to quit my job, my corporate job, which then, paid the bills. I had health insurance, I had benefits, and my identity was wrapped up with my job, my paid job. And so I was kind of teetering on the edge of, oh my God, what do I do? I really want to do this other thing I'm very passionate about, but I'm scared. I'm scared of making the leap into the unknown. And at that time, I heard about you actually through LinkedIn because a mutual friend of ours had liked one of your posts. And as I looked further into it, I'm like, oh, I think Nicole's talking to people like me.
Funny, right?
And it just really resonated. Everything from perfectionism to working really long hours to, just doing a really good job and just working really hard. Um, and so a lot of the messages you had really resonated. And so that's when I reached out.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember when you came in and started to look at all of these challenges around the perfectionism and just like working so hard. Because at that time in your corporate job, I feel like you were working pretty crazy hours. Is that right?
Yeah, I was pretty good about not working nights and weekends, but I was working back to back, like not taking
Mm.
breaks, sometimes forgetting to eat lunch and having to wake up sometimes pretty early because we had meetings in Europe or other things, because I'm based here in the Seattle on the West Coast. And so that was pretty, and I was managing a team and we just had lots and lots of meetings.
Mm. So it was just like a constant grind all the time where you're just like working
Yes,
back to back, long hours, long days. And then in the evenings, if I remember like you just didn't have any energy left and you were supporting your family. And
right.
then you were also trying to work really hard to get out of this job.
Yeah, yeah. At that time, I kind of thought, like, hey, I really need to slow down. And I actually have slowed down compared to previous years. So I actually thought I was taking pretty good care of myself. But then after starting to work with you, I'm like, oh, I wasn't really taking care of myself,
Mm,
not to
mhm.
the degree that I really needed to.
Yeah, and then could you say too, do you feel like just the way you were raised in your childhood probably contributed to some of those pieces? You know, like a lot of the women
Yes.
listening are Asian American and like they have had those experiences. Like, is that something you feel like you learned culturally growing up?
Oh, absolutely. So my parents were immigrants and they sacrificed so much to allow me and my sister to attend college, to take all the different types of, after school classes when we were growing up, all of these things. And so I saw them work. I mean, when I say work, I mean they were working 6 days a week and, only had Tuesdays off, and we never went out to eat until much later in life. We didn't take vacations until much later in life. They were just working, 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 and they were in survival mode as immigrants. And that was kind of something that I just saw and felt that's what I needed to do too to succeed. And I needed to succeed to make my parents proud of me. Um, and so I think that just became my natural MO to just keep on working.
Mm. Yeah, but there was just like such a cost that was happening at that time, still, even when we started to work together. And then what would you say then coming into the program? Like, so you came into my main course, your clear calling at the time. Like, what was it for you that you started to see differently about yourself? What did you start to understand about some of the workaholic tendencies? And then also what you wanted to do and moving into actually being in the caregiving space full time?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I think part of it, like I mentioned before, had to do with really pausing and taking care of myself. One of the things that you taught me and that I now teach caregivers is the idea of doing something for yourself in the morning. First thing, before you take care of anyone else, before you, unload the dishwasher or what have you, you do something for yourself, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. That gives you enough of restoration and a feeling of making yourself a priority that allows you um, to kind of fuel up. And then, so then you are able to take care of others. Just that simple 5, 10 minutes a day to pause and do that first thing. The other practice that I love and I still do to this day is the good jobs list. So before going to sleep, I write down the good jobs, things that I did that day that I'm proud of and that I took care of that no one else may have seen. So my husband may not have seen that I made all these phone calls for his doctor's appointment. My kids may not have seen that I did all these other things, right? But I know I did them. And no one's going to tell me good job but myself. And so in writing them down, I give myself a good job. And I just really, really love that practice. And Nicole, I want to say thank you for teaching that to me. And on behalf of all the caregivers I work with, they thank you too, because they have found that transformative.
Well, it's kind of funny because I remember when I learned that practice and I was like, okay, like I didn't really think I was that hard on myself, until you start to do it. And then you have to actually recognize that you're not doing that at all. Like you're mostly critical of yourself or challenging yourself. And what would you say you noticed about yourself in this process of even doing some really basic, essential, like these are foundational pieces you learn when you work with me. Like, what did you notice and observe in your own experience of like how you related to yourself?
Yeah, I think I did not realize, and now I've realized that I have this critical voice in my head. And it's always saying, oh, you're not doing enough. And I'm never like, fast enough, good enough, brilliant enough. All of those things is the voice that's in my head. And then when I start writing down all the things that I did, I'm like, oh my God, I got a lot of, done today. I have to be proud of myself. And yes, maybe I didn't do X, Y, and Z, this big project that's multi steps, but look at all these other things I got done. And given that I had all these other things that I did today, I should be really proud of myself. And I'm going to still work on this other big project, and it's okay.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Like, I think a lot of times, especially when we get into perfectionism, we get into this all or nothing mentality. So essentially, if you didn't complete everything, now you didn't do anything, like none of it counted. And then you get into this crazy, it's like this crazy cycle where it's like it has to be everything, but then you work yourself to the bone and you might still not finish it anyway. So then now you feel like, oh man, I did nothing versus the truth, which is you actually did quite a few things, just not everything that you wanted to. And I'm curious because since we met, you left your corporate job and you pivoted to being an entrepreneur. How has some of these practices how have they come into play in your entrepreneurial journey? Like, what has it been like for you to be out on your own, not tied to a corporate job and that kind of security, to now have to, basically create your own gig every day?
Yeah. It's be careful what you wish for. And so you want freedom. Well, you get freedom, but
Hmm.
then you are your own boss, for better or for worse. So in the very initial stages, I was actually overworking. My first
Mm.
month after leaving my corporate job, I was back to back doing things for my own self, my own company, and was actually burning out after month one. And after month one, I got sick. I had a really bad cold. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. It cannot be this way. This is not what I should. I'm doing this to myself. No one is
Mm.
doing this to me. I'm my worst boss. And I realized that. And I realized that, oh, wow, I need to pace myself and I need to be kind to myself. And I would say, even though it's been now a year and a half since I've left my corporate job, I have really appreciated some of the messages and some lessons you continue to remind me of, and that is to be kind to yourself, to be patient, to keep your eye on the prize, go in that direction, but don't be so attached to your goal of, X number
Mm.
of, whether it be X number of people who've enrolled in your program, or X number of people who have posted a like on your social media post. You do not to be attached to that number. It's you're going in the right direction, and then it will just constantly build.
Mm.
That's one of the lessons. There are many, but that's something that's top of mind right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kim and she's been in my mastermind. Excuse me. Okay, restarting. Kim's been in my mastermind now, and we've been working a lot on those business pieces. But I feel like everything you learn, like in that foundational part of the course, is so important to where you are now. And I'm kind of curious. I'm going to just go backtrack a little bit in time to that moment where it was clear that your job was done and you were moving on. And what would you say you learned or were coached through that allowed you to be able to make that transition? Because for so many people, they might think that, but it's like a little bit pie in the sky. It's sort of like, well, I want to in theory, but I have no idea how that could possibly happen. And you're somebody who actually made that shift. What would you say helped you the most during that transition period?
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of a confession, and that is I went into your retreat that year on beautiful Whidbey Island, and I went in with intention of getting up enough courage to then leave my job, my corporate job. And I knew I wanted it, and I knew I was going to do it, but I was just scared to take that actual step, to take that plunge. And I'm happy to say, at the end of the retreat, I actually knew I was going to do it. I was going to pull the trigger. I was just going to look at my calendar and figure out when I was going to tell my manager this news that I was going to be leaving the company. Well, then when I got back, my first one on one with my manager was that they had a reorg and my position had been eliminated. And so I had to pretend I was really shocked. Well, I was surprised,
Mhm.
but I had to pretend that I was really upset. And, so I actually felt that the universe was being kind to me. They actually, I feel like I was at the diving board, staring over the edge, wanting to jump. And then finally, the universe just pushed me. Okay, just go do it. And so, what was really great was when that happened, I actually was already primed. I was ready
Mm,
to take the plunge and to just do it. And so for me, it was really a very easy transition because mentally and emotionally, I was there. I could see myself doing this and I could see myself loving it and just really thriving by really looking at this as actually, have you heard of the concept ikigai, Nicole?
I have, but please explain it to everybody. I'd love to share
Yes,
more. Yeah.
yes. I really saw this. So when you, let's see, how do I explain this? So it's a Japanese concept. Okay. So the first circle is around, let's see, what you are good at, right? And then another circle is what you would get paid for. And then another circle is what you're passionate about, right? And I'm not sure if I'm I'm quite getting it quite the words quite right, but in the middle is your calling, where you
Mm,
do something that you're really good at and that you love and that you get paid for. Something that the it's not so much what you get paid for, but what the world needs is probably a
mm,
better way to explain it. And so I really felt stepping into this new chapter in my life professionally to help fellow caregivers as a coach and as someone who helps others by sharing what has worked for me. I felt like that was my calling. I felt like that was my ikigai.
that's so cool. I love how you shared that because I do think that is what people struggle with often is like, what am I good at? What do I want to do? Where am I excited? Because I think that's another piece of it. Like I've talked to people where they like have so many skill sets, but like the idea of entrepreneurship is like, I don't know about that. And I'm like, it's totally fine. You don't have to love it, but you have to be invested enough to want to learn the skill sets to be an entrepreneur. And then you'll be totally fine. Like I went in totally blind, by the way, Kim. Like I don't know if you've heard me talk about it that much, but like I remember when I started, I just like had no idea what I was doing. And I really had no idea what I was in for either. And then you just keep learning. And it's like either that ikigai, that purpose is calling you and you keep listening to it, or you shut it down, like, and it's an interesting practice because I think a lot of people come into me and really underlying what they want. Like we talk a lot about promotion and career advancement, but underneath it all, I think, every human really fundamentally wants to know like why you're here, what you're here to do, like what's your contribution, which is another word for thinking about your purpose, another way of thinking about purpose. But then it can be really like hard to know how to do with it because real life happens. Like you, it's like I have a corporate job, it's really secure, it makes money, it pays for all these things. And then you're like, but it's not what I'm here to do. And then what really happened is the universe kind of said, okay, Kim, well, let's boot you out of that job and put you on the pathway to what you're really here to do.
Yes, yes, very much so. And to add to that, I was very fortunate to really be part of your community, your mastermind at that time. And you had also kind of let those of us who are in your program know who are interested in entrepreneurship. It is the biggest self discovery and self growth path you can be on is to be an entrepreneur. And I can see it more clearly now, a year and a half in. It is so true. It is so darn hard in so many different ways. It really tests you in ways that no other job has. No other job has been this difficult. Um, I don't know. Motherhood is pretty tough too, but that's not
Yeah.
paid. Motherhood and being an entrepreneur, I would say, are the toughest jobs in the world. Um, being an entrepreneur, it tests your stamina, it tests your mindset and your beliefs in yourself. And I feel like I'm constantly being challenged in a good way. And I feel like I'm here to grow, right, as
Mhm.
a person. And it's really helping me do that as well.
Yeah, well, they say that the universe is always expanding and there's like a rate at which the universe is always expanding. So I always think about that too, because every entrepreneur, for those of you listening who are not entrepreneurs, every entrepreneur under the sun has definitely thought about quitting their gig at some point, like, and sometimes many times in one day. Like, it's not just like an isolated experience where you're like, I'm giving this up. But then I also, when that happens to me, I always think, well, what would you do, Nicole? Do you really think that you would be good at working for somebody else at this point in your life? And I'm like, I know that that would be tough for me. And also, on top of it, what my entrepreneurial journey constantly shows me is the opportunity to expand. And I feel like there's many different avenues for expansion. I consider anything essentially can be a personal growth journey. Wanting to get promoted is a personal growth journey. Dating is a personal growth journey. Entrepreneurship is, as long as you bring in that mindset and that mentality. So, what I feel like you're sharing with us also, Kim, is like you brought that energy into that initial time with me, working in your job and really shifting your mindset and who you are and your evolution, which is what prepared you. And that's when the universe was like, all right, you're ready. And like kind of pushed you to be like, now you're ready for this job, because this job is really going to take you to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, the Clear Calling course and all of the lessons were really foundational. And I still look back and think about, oh, yeah, I need to set my boundaries better, or I need to do X, Y, and Z better. And let me go think about what did we learn in the course that is a good reminder to help me come back to being really centered and being really true to myself.
Yeah, beautiful. So beautifully said. Well, Kim, I'd love for you to share a little bit more also now about what you're doing for caregivers. If you could speak to the work that you're doing now, because I know for you, it's really been a calling ever since I met you. And now you get to do it every day.
Yeah, thank you. A year and a half ago, I launched my venture, which is called Caregiver Wisdom. And it is really multifaceted. So I have been leading already this monthly support group for caregivers of chronic illnesses, like my husband's illness, for the past 5 years. During those monthly calls, I choose a topic and curate it in such that we choose a topic that is very relevant and resonates with caregivers, whether it's loneliness, ambiguous loss. It could be about, stress. It could be about a whole bunch of different types of topics that are very common. And we then open it up to share and really connect. And I usually try to give 2 or 3 tips that help people. So it's very constructive to help people manage um, their everyday lives. I've gotten such great feedback from people. So that's what led me to want to do more. And so since then, I've also then launched blog posts. I've created an online community, and I've also created a group course, a group coaching program, and we'll actually be launching a new cohort in September. And then this past January, I decided to embark into one-on-one coaching and got training from a health and wellness coach training program. And that focuses on mindfulness and helping people see their own inner wisdom. And I actually remember Nicole, when I first started working with you, I was telling you about my vision of how I wanted to do this something completely different than my corporate job, and I really wanted to help other caregivers. And they said, "Oh yeah, and you can coach people too." And I thought, "Oh no, no, no! I'm not going to be doing the coaching. I'm just going to curate." And I'm a former journalist, just like you. I'm just going to pick and choose the best experts and then bring them together for my community. And then after going through the coaching program, like, oh, wow, this is so powerful. And the
Mhm.
people I was coaching, everyone said how effective it was for them. And then I started seeing that I could also coach people. And I didn't need to be an expert, quote unquote, of everything caregiving or an expert in all things life, right? All I need to do is to be present there for them and help them see the inner wisdom they have and help them see that they have so many strengths and their own inner knowledge to bring to the table. And that was just so powerful.
Well, it's such a beautiful summation of coaching because I think sometimes people are confused by it. They're like, "What? How is it different from therapy? What is it that's happening?" And it's like such a different activation of like who you are. I feel like you
Yes.
said, it's just like really allowing people to be in their own natural gifts, and it's not about expertise or books or like having so much knowledge. Like at least on the coach side, it's really around helping people see how much they already actually do know. Like I remember when I met you and you were telling me about all of these things, and I was like, oh, yeah, like she's going to have a caregiving business and like be an entrepreneur and a coach. And you were like, no, 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 I'm not definitely not going to do that. Right. And then,
I'm not gonna take, you know why? Because in my mind, I wasn't good enough. Again, the
right.
negative voice,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, I saw that for you, and it's like, it's just a matter of time. Like, it's just a matter of time. Kim will come around, and I didn't know when, and sometimes people come to it quickly, and some people don't, or some people have more to work through before they get to that point. But, yeah, when you came to the retreat and it was really clear, I felt like when we were worked on the retreat, and then afterwards, and then now you've been off to the races, and now you're in this, like, big entrepreneurial journey, which is its own growth path, which is really powerful, but that will make also you a better coach. It makes you a
Yeah.
better person to support the people who are going through their own transformations because all these caregivers need so much support.
Yes. And I really am glad you mentioned the idea of what a coach is versus a therapist, because I,
Mhm.
to be honest, was not that clear in my own mind what a coach
Mm.
was. And I actually believe there is a place for therapy, and I've gone to therapy before. And they're very, very helpful for a lot of emotional and mental challenges and hardships that you go through in life. I think a coach, the way I think of it as a coach, is someone who's rooting you on. You may have a goal in mind, and just going to help you get there, and they're just going to be super supportive of you. And I feel like that is something that all caregivers, and quite frankly, every human really needs. And I just wish that more people were exposed to what coaching is and how it can really help transform their lives. I would say that I've been coaching now for the past several months, and I've had some really amazing success stories of clients who have said, Kim, I've met with you for only 2 times, and people around me see a difference. I've had someone who actually got a job offer and moved her elderly mom across country, and these were things that were not in her sight of vision when we first started working with each other. And
Mhm.
it was and she attributed that working with me for helping shift her energy, and that was so personally fulfilling to hear that I can help people in that way.
Yeah, so beautifully said. And I really think, we think back to the Kim when we first met. If you told her all that, she would have been like, what are you talking about? I'm never going to be able to do any of those things.
It's
But it
true.
speaks to, very much like your transformation, your commitment to your transformation. Like you've really stuck with the work. And I would say that's a big part of it. It's just that commitment to it. And then also being open to the coaching. Like when people always are saying, like, what to me, I always am like, what's the ideal person to be in coaching? And it really is like committed and coachable. Those are the two things. I think sometimes people think they need to have more together and need to have figured things out. And I'm like, no, you just need to be committed to it. And I would say commitment is like the number one thing. And then really being open to what you're experiencing and learning, because all you're doing is actually excavating more about yourself. Like that person you worked with, like she already knew to do those things. You just helped her see that really clearly so that she could do it versus
Yeah.
being stuck, for being stressed and anxious and like, I can't make it work. You just helped her clarify.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. So it's so beautiful, Kim. I love you sharing all of that. And then for anyone who might be nervous or in that experience of like, what is this really like? What would you say to them if they're like, oh, well, do I want to be coached? Do I want to be in that experience? Would you have any recommendations for them for how to think about it?
I would say that it is for a time of self exploration and going deeper into yourself and seeing for yourself a brighter path, if that makes sense, forward. And I would say that it's really for everyone and anyone. And I highly recommend that everyone try it. I mean,
Mm.
I believe that there is I think you put it really well that if you have a commitment for growth and you have a commitment for um, bringing your life to become even bigger and better. And sometimes you may have a goal in mind. So in my health and wellness training program, we talked about, oh, some people may have health goals like, losing weight or whatever it may be, or it's I don't know, dealing with some other kind of issue, or maybe you have a goal of maybe decluttering your house. And so, yes, a coach can help you with those things and hold you accountable, but it's also about sometimes really envisioning what your life will look like 5, 10 years from now, and what are the steps you can take today to get there. So, in that regard, it's very empowering.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I always laugh because you know me, I have lots of coaches as well because I feel like it's important to have somebody help hold you to having a vision, but also living into that every day. Because there can be, all of us have days where we're like, oh man, this feels tough. This is hard. I don't know if I want to do this. And then coming back into like, no, 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 what am I committed to? Like, what's really important to me? So, whether you're like an entrepreneur, and we're talking a bit about that journey, but I would say that's true of anyone. Like I have so many women in corporate environments who don't want to leave their corporate job, but they want to feel happy and aligned and like they're on a path where they're rising up and growing within their corporate job. And all of that is totally possible as well. And so I love popping in that reminder for people. It's not about the version that you're doing. It's more about can you be in that experience of full transformation and expansion? And I think on a deeper level, expression. Like, how can you be fully expressed? Like, I think about Kim in corporate and then Kim being a caregiving entrepreneur. And it's like, oh, yeah, like that's the expressed version of Kim. The previous one was like the one who thought she had to toe the line and do things a certain way. And then now this is the one who's like, oh, I'm in the world. I'm doing here what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting because I think there were different times in my corporate career of 30 years where I was more in my truth, or more, how do I say, aligned. And I was actually really into my work, and I felt there was a really deep connection. And then, as you know, over 30 years, there's ebbs and flows, right? In terms of what's more important to you, and you have life experiences that make things different and things shift within yourself. And that's what I experienced. So I knew I had to leave my corporate job to really live what I felt again was my ikigai, my real calling.
Yeah. Well, so beautifully said, Kim. And thank you so much for sharing your journey with the women listening who are contemplating moves like what you're talking about or feeling a little bit of that tug, because I feel like it's important for us. And like what I care about with the podcast is that stories like this exist and people see, because I think a lot of times it can be very isolating when you're thinking about this stuff or you don't know people who've done it or you're not sure how to get there, to be like, oh, there's proof in the pudding, right? Like Kim has done it. Like it is totally possible to make that shift. So thank you so much for sharing that story. And I know she's a little prepared for this because she listens to the podcast all the time. It is time for our rapid fire questions. Sometimes people come on and they're like, I have no idea. I've never heard these. I know Kim's heard them, but we're going to do it and see how it goes. So it's time for our rapid fire questions. So, Kim, what is the last thing that you watched on TV?
I have to say that my family, I have two teenage boys and a husband, and in our family, in our nuclear family, and we love anime.
Hmm.
So almost every night we watch anime if the kids get their homework done. We watch
Nice.
anime. And to be honest, I don't remember the very last one because we go through so many different ones. But I will say one of my favorite ones that we are watching is Demon Slayer.
Hmm. Well, I don't know anything about anime, so but my husband might actually know something about that. So thank you for sharing. And then for any anime fans out there, watch Demon Slayer. Okay, awesome. Amazing. Okay, what is on your nightstand? Question 2. What's on your
Yes.
nightstand?
On my nightstand, I have a salt lamp. I have my CPAP machine because I unfortunately have sleep apnea.
Mhm.
And I have, what else? An alarm clock. And I actually have my journal where I write my good jobs list.
Awesome. I love that it's right there. Amazing. Okay. Kim, when was the last time you tried something new and what was it?
Oh my gosh. this one I'm not prepared to answer. I didn't think about this one ahead of time. The last time I did something new. Um, oh my goodness. I am totally thrown for a loop, even though I listen to this podcast and I've listened to almost every episode.
I love that. Thank you. I'm so glad you listened to all of them.
Almost all of them. I'm just a little behind. Let's see. Uh, okay, well, I'll just pick something. So we moved to Seattle about 3 years ago now. And I inherited a huge garden that the previous owner had planted. And I'm very, very grateful. And I really love being in nature. Part of the reason we moved to Seattle is for that. That and to be closer to my Zen teachers here.
Mm.
And one of the things I think that is new for me is figuring out what are weeds and not weeds. Because to me, some of these weeds are actually pretty because they
Totally. I
have
feel that way
flowers.
too. Yeah.
And so, and so I was in my garden just last weekend and trying to distinguish what is a weed and what is not a weed. That sounds kind of weird, but I was like, oh, that is a beautiful flower, but it's actually a weed. I need to rip that one out.
Well, as my husband always says, it's only a weed because you say it. So, although there are some invasive weeds, as I
Right.
argue with him about it, but I'm like, I want you to cut that down. And he's like, but it's pretty. And I'm like, it's a weed. So I know exactly what you're talking about. We have like little back and forth about those things too.
Yeah.
So funny. Okay, last one. What are your top three most used emojis?
The smiley face,
Mhm.
the heart, and the thank you or the prayer emoji.
Mhm. Okay, beautiful. Well, Kim, such a joy to have you on the podcast today. So, what is the best way for people to reach you, or if they're a caregiver, to find out more about what you do?
Yeah, thanks. I have a website and it is caregiverwisdom.net. I can also be reached on LinkedIn, Kim Moy, Kimmoy.
Yes,
Y
we're
for
waiting for
yogurt.
the day where it's easy on LinkedIn for us to just have a link there. But we'll link it below in the show notes and also her website. And Kim, I'm just grateful to you for I actually really have loved seeing your expansion and your growth. And it's so fun to reflect on your journey because you really have grown so much in the time that we've worked together and continue to grow. And it's really so fun to support you in your entrepreneurial journey as well.
Thank
Yes.
you, Nicole.
Thank you so much for being here.